Morning.
Morning.
Thanks for coming. It's great to see you all. I thought since I know pretty much everyone here, I think, probably on Zoom as well, but just in case, I thought I'd introduce myself because this is my first Sunday talk. I don't know, maybe my last, depending on how it goes. But yeah, so I thought I'd introduce myself. My name is Pat Quinn. Patrick works just as well. Either one is fine. And I've been coming to Dartmouth since around 2009 is when I started coming here. And then I took the precepts in 2010, and then I received lay ordination in 2023. So that's the greatest hits of my practice here at Dartmouth. So the kind of impetus for my talk kind of came from two things. The first thing was that in the Dartmouth newsletter for August, Steve wrote about that the curriculum for 2026 to 2027 starts in the fall and then ends in the spring, has a kind of a theme for the first time since we've been teaching classes. And the theme is, the curriculum kind of focus is the art of living with others. And in his writing about that, Steve Matujak says, the yearly topic serves to raise an issue that is relevant to both our daily lives and the Buddha Dharma, encouraging us to see that there is no real distinction between them, even though we may act, think, and speak as though there is. So the basis of my talk is going to be kind of focused on that statement. So the title of my talk is, "And Then There Were Two Puppies in Our House." So.
Hey Pat, can you just get the mic a little closer?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, there you go.
Gotta really eat it, huh? Oh yeah, there you go. Sorry, I'm pretty loud when I speak, so I just assumed. So yeah, let me know if there's anything. So we are a dogless household, but there's a contingent of us within the household that would like to have a dog, and we kind of have gravitated to that we would adopt a dog, and I'll move up a little bit more too. So that's kind of we registered with a handful of foster organizations and got background checked and everything. And that was kind of, we were just going to kind of feel it out and see if something came up. Our schedule was kind of wild and crazy, so we were trying to find something that would work for our family and a dog. And we have friends who are foster advocates, and as well as neighbors who are big foster advocates. So we had a lot of helpful guidance on this journey. So we kind of been looking at websites when they post dogs, and they have social media feeds you can follow to see when dogs are needed to be adopted or fostered. And maybe at a point where my wife and I were very well rested, we saw that this litter of puppies was coming from Texas as part of a big movement of foster animals from Texas to Minnesota. And as part of that litter, there was a bonded pair of puppies, which means that at least for the first parts of their lives, they can't be separated. It's just they're attached to each other. So we said, well, maybe we just jump in the deep end and adopt or foster two puppies. It was for 10 days, so there was like a finite. There was a window at the end of it, so we did. So we fostered through this organization called Rough Start, and they provided everything, and we picked up the puppies a couple weeks ago on a Friday, and their names were Goldie and Prowl. And if you're a Minnesota sports person, you'll notice that the names of the entire litter were after Minnesota sports mascots. So Goldie, Gophers, and then Prowl is the Minnesota Lynx, WNBA team's mascot. So we picked them up on Friday. We don't have a ton of dog experience. I grew up with a dog, but to be honest, I was not the caretaker of the dog. And it was just, right from the get-go, it was it was like pretty much nonstop. They couldn't be left alone. Or they would start crying. They woke up, the first couple nights they were waking up, it was like an infant. They were waking up multiple times a night. Thankfully, my wife was off of work. Just to give credit where credit's due, my wife was off of work the week of the 10 days. So she did a majority of the overnight shift because I had to go to work in the morning. So just to give credit where credit's due. And then Goldie, who was the female, she could climb the gates that we had in our house. So as soon as you turn your back, she'd be up and over the gate and running around the house. And Prowl, who was the boy, he was a bit of a tank. He would try and kind of like get up halfway and then kind of fall backwards, and but then he would be left and he'd start crying. And I sit in the mornings when I'm not here. I sit at our house about 5 a.m. So there was a little bit of interrupted sitting because I'd go down to help, let the dogs out to go to the bathroom and stuff, and walk them around the neighborhood. They had a penchant for when they did get out, they would go find a spot to go to the potty inside the house, which is probably pretty normal for a puppy who hasn't been potty trained. And then they would wake up occasionally in the middle of the night. So there were all these kind of disruptions that made me notice that I had this idea of kind of the way things, I have a routine in my life. I have an idea of the way things. I try to have a routine in my life. But I have this idea. I think that's kind of the crux of it, to get to the point of what Steve said in the newsletter, is that you can have this idea of what you think your life looks like, and that doesn't always match up with what's actually showing up in the moment. And having these puppies really helped me see that, and also to kind of see sometimes how we can distinguish or set this distinction between our practice here at the Zendo, or if we sit at home, or wherever we practice, kind of boxing that and saying that's our practice, but then this is our life, and these are the things that we deal with in our life, and those are sort of separate from our practice, how that can kind of develop. And when we have those ideas, then when we make that distinction, then there's always something that will get in the way of what our life is. As soon as that separation is made between what's showing up right now in my life, everything else is going to get in the way of that. There are times where maybe things line up and everything's going your way, but still deep down there's that separation from just being present for what's showing up. In the Fukanza Zengi, which is Dogen's teaching on meditation, who's a teacher in the Soto Zen lineage, a prominent teacher in the Soto Zen lineage, in the Fukanza Zengi, Dogen says, if there's even a hair's breadth of difference, the way is as different as heaven from earth. If the least like or dislike arises, the mind is lost in confusion. So as we had these dogs, that thought, that teaching just popped into my head, because ultimately there's nothing missing from what shows up in your life from moment to moment. But we think there is something missing, and that's where that separation occurs, that like or dislike. As soon as there's any sort of notion of how things should go, or who I am, or who other people are, there's that separation, and we can think that okay, I don't have X, Y, or Z, and I need to go get that thing, and we're just overlooking the fact that everything we have is right here in this moment. So there's kind of, when I was writing this talk, thinking about kind of ways that this would manifest in our life and in our practice. which is, as Steve mentioned, there's no, I say those things and it makes it sound like they're separate, but they're not. And one of the things that came to my mind is this saying of grin and, you know the phrase grin and bear it. I'm sure everybody's heard that. I suppose it's kind of considered an old-timey phrase now, but I don't know all the new phrases that my kids say. But we kind of have this, grin and bear it may be used in the context of, you got to take your medicine or you got to do something hard and kind of get through it. And then you can get to the good stuff, or you can get back to the things you want to have in your life. But I think on a more subtle level, I think that's kind of, if we don't notice, what's so helpful about these teachings is that they kind of, if we sit down and settle ourselves, we can see how that shows up. And we can see that on a very, very subtle level, we're kind of just doing that all the time. Like, I don't want to, pick up the puppy's poop all over the place. I want to just, snuggle it. But if you slow down and take up this practice, you can see that we're kind of, doing that throughout our lives. And I don't mean to say that, I do that. I'm not trying to say that as like it's a negative thing. It's just, our practice is just to notice that and come back. Alternatively, kind of as a twist on this grin and bear it idea, is kind of a feeling that I had when I came to this practice, specifically around sesshin, which public service announcement, there's one in September, is this, I kind of had this like no grin, just bear it kind of mentality with sesshin, where I was like, well, you gotta, there's all these rules and you gotta go and you have to, do things very formally and there's this seemingly complicated way to eat, and I brought all of that to sesshin. That's not what sesshin is about at all. But I brought all that kind of mental garbage, so to speak, to sesshin. I created this idea of what I thought sesshin was in my head, and it was so far from that conception that it's almost laughable. I did mess up on Ryoki, but there was somebody sitting next to me, and they fixed my bowls for me, just very quietly, and I messed up other things, and it was not a big deal, and you just go on, and I think that's the, you just take care. I think what sesshin shows you is that you just take care of what's showing up. It's just a way to take care of what's showing up in each moment. And you have a weekend, you can just do that, and that's all there is to it. And then you can see, though, like for me at least, you can see when your hamster wheel gets going, and you're like, oh, I know, I can hear the server walking the stairs, so now I got to do this thing, and you're like 100 steps ahead, so that when what shows up in front of you is going on, you're not like you're not present to what I will say, I notice anytime I mess up in sesshin, it's because I'm not actually paying attention to what's going on. I'm thinking of the next thing, so. So our practice is just to come back, and I think it can seem like that's not enough. Like when you first come to this practice, you can think, well, yeah, but I got to do something. Like there's got to be something more to this than just coming back and coming back. But I think especially with everything that's kind of churning in our minds, and that's enough. That's just enough to see, just to come back, and it's a very gentle practice, and that I've got to do something. Just being aware of that, you can see that. Well, what do I have to? What do I have to do? In taking up this practice, I think the thing that the Fukan Zazengi quote, the reason why I really appreciate it is that it just reminds me that we can see how that hair's breadth of difference it's just, you know, I'll just say, speaking for myself, it can come up a lot. It's just, you just notice how that the mind just manifests these things, and then we're kind of off. And we just come back. But when I actually sit down and I'm honest with myself, when you get in arguments or you have disagreements or frustrations or, all these things, I've just noticed this practice has helped me see that, a lot of those things are because I had conceptions of what I thought the situation was, who I thought the person was. And I think in a very kind-hearted way, like, there's no judgment in that. This happens. We get angry because of any number of things. We get angry, we get jealous, like all of these things show up. But our practice, in a very simple, kind way, we just notice that, and then in noticing that, it can drop away, and then maybe something comes up again, and we notice it, and it drops away. Steve Hagen mentions this occasionally, like, it's not like we get on a balance beam with this practice and then we're just on it. Like, we're on this Zen presence balance beam and everything's peachy keen for the rest of our lives. We step off, and we step off, and we get back on, and we step off, and we get back on. That's our practice. We step off, and we get back on. There's another analogy that kind of comes from what I do for a living. I'm an electrical engineer, and I work for a utility, a power company, like Excel, but not Excel. And so we have generation power plants that we have to serve our customers, and some of it's wind and solar, and some of it's fossil-fueled synchronous generators, we call them. And so those generators, the fossil-fueled generator, either produces hot gas, which turns the turbine, and that's connected to what we call the generator rotor, and that turbine spins, which then spins the rotor, and then the rotor's in like a cage of wire that produces there's a magnetic field that's produced, and that's how generates the voltage, and that's how you get your power to your house. That's a very kind of condensed version of that. So either you're burning a fuel to create steam, which turns the turbine, or you're combusting a fuel to create hot gas, which turns the turbine, and that turbine is hooked up to like a magnet, basically, that spins really fast. And by really fast, I mean like 3,600 revolutions per minute, like very fast. And these turbines, the generator rotor itself weighs like 200 tons, can weigh 200 tons for like a nuclear power plant. So the reason I provide that background is because if there's any sort of imperfection whatsoever in the design of that rotor, like micron level of distortion in the metal or anything like that, it can create issues. And on the flip side, the generator is connected to the rest of the power system. So they're all connected in this network that runs all over the United States and everywhere else. But the end use customers can also create disturbances that affect the spinning of the generator. And an example of this, which is kind of a hot topic these days, like AI data centers, the way that they consume power is such that they basically turn on when when somebody's asking them to create like a AI generated photo of a dolphin and a monkey playing cards or something. That causes the data center to turn on, and then it's kind of while it's on, it's what they call like learning, and it has all these little, within this period of time being on, it's using and not using energy in a very fast fashion. So what that does is that it can create it can create issues with the rotors spinning at its frequency, and this load is creating this kind of perturbation on the system, and if those if those have like the same resonant frequency, it can cause perturbations in the rotor. And the issue with that is that if the rotor gets perturbed in just the right way, it can spin off its axis and basically at 3,600 RPM, it basically spontaneously disintegrates and shoots its metal like everywhere, like through the turbine wall, like buries it, quarter of a mile piece of metal buried in concrete, 6 feet down, like very, very bad news. And it's happened in a number of places, and it's catastrophic. You can't fix the generator when that happens. So the reason I, tell that long, convoluted story is because in that situation, there's no as soon as that perturbation happens, within cycles, the generator is destroyed, and there's fragments of copper and heavy metals everywhere. But the I can't think of the right word to say it, but what our practice allows us to come back. We don't, if we, get in an argument with a friend, and tell them things that we wouldn't want to ever tell them, we can come back. We can notice what we've done and come back. And even in not those kind of more dire situations, just in our daily life, there's always the opportunity to come back, and that is our practice. I always do this. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to have enough stuff to say, and then I look and I'm like, I have way too much stuff to say. So I actually put some stuff on a third page, with just knowing that I'm not going to get to it. But another thing I noticed with the puppies was that for the first 48 hours, they were they were very affectionate. They weren't kind of spooked or anything by us, but they just really wanted, they just would, if you sat on the ground, they would just kind of come into your lap and just observe life from your lap, which was just the best. It was so wonderful. But you're kind of a captive audience. You have two puppies in your lap, and they're perfectly content just sitting there the entire day. But as a human, you're like, well, what? I might have to go check in on something, or all these. I noticed there was this kind of uneasiness after a while. You're like, I can't just sit here all day. What's I can't do that. But why not? I mean, why? Who's telling you that you can't do that? I mean, granted, yes. I mean, if you ordered a pizza and it's about to arrive, yes, you have to put the puppies down and go get the pizza. But just in those moments, you're just sitting. I was just sitting in my backyard with the puppies. You notice these thoughts kind of percolate. You would kind of come up, and you just. They're very compelling, they seem very real. And then the tricky thing with that is that then, you get on with your life and you look back and you're like, man, I wish I was really present for that. I was off thinking about X, Y, and Z, and I completely missed what was showing up. I was thinking about some project I had at work, and I couldn't be present with the puppies, and then when I'm working on the project at work, I'm not present for that because I'm thinking about something else, and it's, why is it not enough just to be present for what's actually going on right now? The other thing I noticed as part of this puppy odyssey was they either had, we'd have to walk them. They didn't have a lot of stamina because they were 12 pounds, so we'd walk them frequent amounts of time for short distances. And they kind of had two speeds. One was like 0 miles per hour, where they would just kind of like park and like smell things or whatever. You know, they'd smell something and just like smell on it for like, it felt like an eternity. Or they would just like bolt, like 100 miles an hour. And I'm not fast. I never was fast, and as I get older, I'm less fast. So it was like, you know, I was afraid I was gonna like rip my hamstring or something sprinting after these dogs. But I noticed that when they were sniffing around, I'd like, especially if it was like 4:30 in the morning, I'd be pulling them, like, come on, like I want to go back to bed for 25 minutes or something. Or when they took off, I was like holding them back, like, no, you have to go at my speed, like. And then at one point I just realized, well, if I just let them do their thing and just, you know, didn't pull them, and then when they took off, then run after them, that we would make just as good a time, if not better, because I wasn't like resisting what they wanted to do naturally. And I think that's kind of a metaphor for our lives, is that we're always resisting whatever's showing up because we want to do something else. The kind of in that realm, I remember there was a point. I mean, when I kind of started coming, you know, taking up this practice a little more, I don't know, on a regular schedule. It was about the same time we had kids, and so it was kind of the situation where I wanted to sit here, you know, and come on Sundays, but it was also like that wasn't our lives at that point, or even now, like we have a lot of stuff going on. But I remember, you know, the teachers have all said to this to me in some fashion or other, either Steve or Norm, is that, you know, this is your practice, whatever that is. Take the dogs, the kids, your personal life, like that. There's this distinction that maybe I was making, that, well, I need to get here, or I need to sit, you know, here or whatever, because that's my practice. But that's not, the practice doesn't end outside these walls. We take it up in each moment, and I think hopefully if I've, you know, kind of conveyed something here, is that in any moment there's an opportunity to notice what you're doing and what's going on, and not to be judgmental. I mean, that's not helpful either, and to a certain extent that just leads to more thinking and you know, more beating yourself up, and that's just, we talk about, we use the phrase in various contexts of dropping away, and I think that's a nice way of saying it, because there's no judgment in that. It's just naturally, it drops away when you notice it. You notice what you're doing, and then yeah. So I'll do one more little story, and then I'll call it, I think. Yeah. And I feel like I've said enough, so maybe I'll just do an anecdotal story, not make it into a teaching or anything. But the other thing that I thought was a nice reminder for me about how much I completely miss. This even happened the other day where Steve goes, "Did you hear that bird?" And I was like, "What bird?" And I noticed that happens a lot in my life. Like, for example, when I'm, you know, Steve Matuszek tells these stories about, like, if you're driving to work and you've done it, like, I know I've worked at the same place for like 15 years now, so I've driven to Maple Grove like a bajillion times. And sometimes it's like autopilot. Like, you get to the office or you get to like the grocery store and you're like, how did I get here? and you notice that you've like completely been tuned out of what was going on, which is mildly concerning if you're in a 2-ton automobile. But but I noticed that when I was just sitting with the puppies is that Goldie, the female, would, like, she'd find like at first, like I couldn't even see it, but she'd find like a bug or something. And I know people who with cats will do this too, I think, but like she was like a novelty to her. Like I mean, she did get stung by a bee while she was with us, which was kind of a little scary, but she just got puffed up and then everything was fine. But this was like a little non-stinging bug, and she'd kind of play with it and then let it go, and then it would kind of like try to get away, and then she'd kind of put her mouth on it, and then like spit it out, and but it made me kind of notice how often I overlook what might be considered, and I'll put this in quotes, inconsequential things. Because I think we can kind of, as Dogen said, kind of split things up, and then things become, whether it's like or dislike, that's okay. People have likes and dislikes, that's fine. You can hold those, lightly, as Norm Randolph would say. But also in what's important and what's not important, I think, which can be maybe a little bit more subtle on what we deem is important and what we deem is unimportant. And a lot of times, at least, what this practice has shown me is I can quickly do that. Very quickly, just, this is unimportant, I'm going to focus on this. Yeah. So, sign up for fall classes. That's all I have. So yeah, thank you. I was thinking about this. I was mildly nervous about giving this talk, and Jed. I think Jed did this in a very kind-hearted, intentional ways. He knew that if he gave me like 7 months to work on this, I would take 7 months, and my wife might not ask me to do a talk again. So he gave me a month and a half. So I was and we had the puppies, and then my in-laws moved, and we were visiting them, and everything was, but stuff's always showing up. So, but I remember when I first came here, I was like, one thing I don't have to worry about is I'm never giving a Sunday talk. Never, ever, ever. But it was, yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful to the students and teachers who give Sunday talks, and they mean so much to me that, yeah, anyway, I'm just rambling now. Anybody have any questions?
Well, I can say you're speaking my language as a puppy person, so I understand your pain. The pain is real.
Yeah, and we gave them back. And I mean, well, I should say, yeah, they did get adopted, but even that was like, it was like, we all like were like, so the adoption event was at the Mall of America, which in the rotunda, which is kind of this open space, and they had these booths that we had to bring the puppies to the booth. But like, it's the Mall of America, so there's like hundreds of people wanting to pet the puppy, and it's like, you're kind of like, I kind of felt bad for like zoo animals. Like, you're like, everybody's like staring at you, and they're like, can we pet the puppy? And it was, somebody came to the event wanting to adopt one of them immediately. They were there when we got there, so we came in, and within like 5 minutes, they're like signing paperwork and adopting the puppy, and we were all tearing up. It was really hard. It was really hard. And then the other one got adopted 20 minutes after that, which is wonderful. The families were very wonderful, and they had dogs and had lost a dog and wanted a new dog, and they were very great. But, it was like in 10 days how attached we got to those. I mean, I just have the greatest respect and appreciation for foster advocates, because hoofda, it is, yeah. It is it's a lot of love, a lot of love in there, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, thanks for your talk, Pat. I thought it was sort of interesting, is perturbing turbine, is that sort of how you talk about it, or a generator, is that how you talk about it?
Yeah, they call it like a perturbation, yeah.
Yeah, perturbation, because, that's what happens to us too. We get perturbed. And it was really interesting because, of course, the result of the perturbation you were talking about could be pretty devastating, right? Which I thought, again, you did a nice job of tying that into then human behavior. But one of the things that was really interesting about it was that, in a way, it was not even, we can think about getting people riled up, and we can think about that as perhaps a willed thing. We're trying to do that. Sometimes we do that. We want attention or we want some kind of power or something, and so we'll do that. But the description you had was there were like these oscillations, right? So kind of like, we'll just say like wavelengths, were these two different wavelengths that were coming together, and they weren't operating so well together, you know? So I just thought that was a really, really cool metaphor. Thanks for sharing that.
I'm glad you. I don't talk about my job that much because it's kind of, people's eyes kind of glaze over, and but it is, yeah. I remember when I graduated college, it was early 2000s, so everything was like, you know, go work in Silicon Valley and, you know, do all that fun. And I'm not a computer guy, so that wasn't my jam, but utility work was considered kind of, you know, you work for utility, it's pretty stodgy but stable, kind of boring in some respects to what some people consider, but geez, now, you know, with data center stuff and, you know, renewable generation and it's the hip thing now.
Hey, Pat, we had a question over here.
Pat, thank you for your talk. That was really good. I think I had similar conversations with Norm. Like I was here at SSE, and you know, we're both dads, and I'm like, I should be spending more time with my kids. And he said, kids are good practice too. You know, it's like now I feel like maybe that was just a stock answer that he gave all us dads, so that's fine. But you know, we can't spend all our time with our kids, and I don't think it would be good for us to spend 100% of our time with our kids. But I think that's a very common thing. You know, you practice and you have young kids. That guilt that, you know, I should be spending more time with my kids, and maybe I should have, you know, but what's done is done. But I do appreciate you bringing it up, so thanks.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I appreciate that. Yeah. I talked to Norm once about that too. And basically, like, okay, just Norm, give me a game plan. Like, just tell me how. You know. I know Norm had kids. I'm like, well, you know, what do you do? And he did not give me an answer, which was the proper response. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.